Hola amigos de Comics S.A., soy Beta y es un gusto para mí tenerles este programa súper especial. Tenemos invitados de lujo, pero antes de eso les voy a presentar el panel que va a estar el día de hoy para esta entrevista. Tenemos a Roberto,
Hola.
a Arturo y a Carlos. Pero
Hola.
yo me despido, estaré con ustedes en el chat y pues bueno, atáquenos con sus preguntas y que disfruten mucho esta entrevista. Carlos.
Gracias, Beta. Hola, buenas noches a todos. Qué gusto que estén aquí. De veras, hoy es un programa de súper lujo. Estamos muy emocionados. Vamos a aclarar más antes de empezar. El programa hoy, por lógica, lo vamos a hacer en inglés. Si hacemos traducción simultánea, se nos va la mitad del tiempo en traducir. Ya después lo podrán encontrar subtitulado y probablemente hasta doblado. Pero por ahora el programa va a ser completamente en inglés. Espero que entiendan y que nos pasemos un rato increíble, ¿no? Entonces, pues creo que Arturo, Roberto, no hay necesidad de hacerla más cansada. Vamos a presentar a nuestro panel de hiper super lujo. Y tenemos, pues a ver, aviéntalos, Fer. Nada más a Luis Simonson, John Bogdanov y Dan Jurgens, los creadores básicamente de la muerte de Superman. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Muy bien, gracias.
Great. Hi guys.
Hi guys.
Wheezy.
Hey
Dan.
Wheezy.
Hermano. Big brother.
Okay, so we're just introducing the panel to everyone, and we want to talk a little bit about the death of Superman, how it was such a huge event. I remember reading from Mike that nobody expected it to get this big, that it was partly because it was a slow news week when it was sent to the press, and suddenly there was no election anywhere, no revolution in any country, there was no earthquake, so everyone picked it up, and it was amazing how every single news outlet, every newspaper, on the radio stations, everyone was talking about the death of Superman.
Yeah, and you guys did what nobody could do. I mean, Lex Luthor tried, Brainiac tried, even Doomsday tried. They couldn't do it. You guys were the ones who actually killed Superman. And I mean, we all know that Superman is one of the biggest heroes there are. I mean, it's iconic. It's one of the oldest ones, 1938, so forth.
Sorry, the biggest.
The biggest, yes.
And the oldest. He was the first prototype.
Yes.
So, I think the question on everybody's mind is, how did it come about? I mean, how did you guys actually get to kill Superman? I mean, how did everything start?
Who wants to start?
Who wants to start?
Okay, ladies first. Wheezy.
Oh dear. Okay. As I remember it, and we were all different people with different memories, and I don't remember things as clearly as I should probably. But I believe that we had been planning on marrying Lois and Clark. There had been a meeting of several days in which we worked out a continuity in which they would be married. And then Jeanette Kahn came in and said, oh, but you can't marry them because we have this TV show. And we were perturbed. So it's like we had to suddenly decide what to do. We had to decide what to do relatively quickly, because I think we had one more day, is that right, of our big meeting, in which we had to work out a year's worth of continuity. And Jerry Ordway, as I remember it, said, as he often did, let's kill him. And we were all of the opinion that maybe it was about time. So I guess we did. That's as I remember it.
Okay.
John, how about you? How do you remember it?
Well, pretty much the same way. I differ with just a couple of things. One, I'm not sure that it was just because it was a slow news day that it became so big. I think that might be Mike being humble.
Okay.
But we just had one of our super summits, and we had come up with a lovely year's worth of stories leading up to the marriage of Clark and Lois. Something that the creators of Superman had planned to do back in the 40s. And we were, in fact, I think, perturbed. But, Jeanette and Mike had very sound reasoning for it, in that there was this show coming on television. Nobody knew if it would be a big hit or not, but the idea was, if we could hold off on the marriage until the show got to that point, that maybe we could, the show and the comic could benefit each other by coordinating somehow the marriage on screen and in the comics. So from a marketing standpoint, it would have been a very good idea probably, and unique. But for us who had been, locked in a conference room at DC for 3 days or 4 days or however long it was, sort of having to start all over. Yeah, it was a little perturbing until, well, yes, of course, Jerry always said, "Oh, let's kill him," ha 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 ha. And then Louise, who had been editor of the X books over at Marvel and had killed many characters, spoke up and said, well, guys, what you get from killing a character is, particularly a beloved character, is you get to show what that character meant to the world, to all their friends. You get to see the reactions of the friends, of the supporting cast, even of the enemies, of the world at large. And so you sort of get to tell a story about what that poor dead character, poor dead Doug, or whatever, meant to everybody. And that's, I think, when we all started to sit up and think about killing Superman seriously. Because we're all of us were of a generation that, we'd grown up seeing George Reeves on television, and we were all working on Superman because it was a labor of love from the start, I think, for all of us. And so people started talking back and forth about the funeral, actually. Before we ever talked about how to kill him or how he was going to die, we sort of, the funeral for a friend storyline kind of wrote itself, and everybody was throwing ideas into the pot, and everyone had scenes they wanted to do. I think it was Dan who wrote this great scene with Bibbo saying it should have been me, and Wheezy had this idea for, of course, Ma and Pa Kent having to watch the funeral of their son on television because they couldn't be there and they couldn't reveal their connection to Superman. And so, these great writers in the room started to come up with these wonderful bits that would show the comics fandom, who in those days were all about Wolverine or the Punisher or Batman, what they would remind people what Superman meant, because we'd be expressing what Superman meant to us. And so as I recall, the funeral for a friend kind of happened first, before the death of Superman. And when it came time to think about the death, we all agreed nobody wanted Luthor or any of the Superman's regular rogues gallery to have the honor or the triumph of it. We knew Superman had to die trying to save the world and save the people he loved. But Dan had, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but Dan had always sort of led the fight for Superman to have more punchable bad guys. And he was responsible for introducing a number of more Superman level foes for Superman to battle. And he had brought in the wonderful design for Doomsday at the time, just as, a part of his campaign to improve Superman's rogues gallery, which back in the old days was pretty lame. Well, and this was a crusade of Dan's, and the way I recall it is that we all came up with a design for the monster that would end up killing Superman, and then we all voted, and Dan won hands down.
Wow.
Wow.
How about you, Dan?
One of the things that's important to understand is that was a long time ago, so that kind of colors, I believe, are different memories, because what I remember is when we arrived at that meeting, and I remember the date very well because I had to fly out of my city on November 1st after a tremendous blizzard on Halloween. And I had to have my neighbors push my car down the street so I could get out. And the reason it was important to go is we already knew that the wedding was off. And we had to come up with a different idea for the storyline. And we met during the weekend in New York, because at that time, everybody was out of the offices. So it was a lot easier if we just met like on a Saturday and Sunday. And we kind of took over the place. And we had, and John and Wheezy gave voice to this, somehow doing a Death of Superman type story had come up previously in meetings. And we'd sort of laugh about it and discuss it a little bit. And some of it was just because we knew that, it'd be an ultimate fun type story to do, but we had nothing else to go with it ever. In that meeting, I had a yellow legal pad that had a couple of things on it. One was 2 different ideas just scrawled out, Death of Superman, and underneath it was Monster Crashes Metropolis. And that's where I had the drawing of Doomsday, very rough drawing of Doomsday on the yellow legal pad. And a lot of it is, as we talked about ideas, and it's absolutely true that I think we had mumbled about Death of Superman a couple of times in the meeting, and then we couldn't get on to anything else because Mike Carlin, our editor, kept saying, you can't just kill Superman. You can't just kill Superman. And we go like, why not? You need a story is kind of where he would get to. And then Jerry did say something of the lines that, well, if we just kill him, let's just kill him. And, and we laughed about it. We got onto it. And it is true. We started talking about the funeral first, and it oriented around what Wheezy had said about what are we saying about the character. And we all got so much into the idea of building out the funeral for a friend story that's when we found the emotion. And because without the emotion, you don't have a story. And once we had the emotion, then we started to drift back to how does Superman die? And I think it was Mike who said, well, what about the monster? Because we kept going back and forth. Should it be Luthor? Should it not? There was a feeling in the room on the part of some that it should be. Others thought maybe it should be somebody else. How would it happen? And this is one thing I want to really emphasize, which is the process of creation is never a straight line. It's never linear. It goes up and it goes down and up and down and back and forth and around. And the wonderful thing about our room of creators is everyone was truly invested in Superman. And I think we all had very much a shared sensibility about the character. So we wanted to be true to the character. If you all agree about who the character is, that's when you find the heart of the story. That's when you find the emotion, and then you can start to work everything else out. And I think it was Mike in there somewhere who said, well, maybe that guy, Doomsday didn't even have a name then. I mean, he was just the monster. Maybe he's our killer. And then we started to fuse a couple of stories, and we were all very enthusiastic. We all got into it, pacing out the story, and it really did, in several occasions, work backwards. And one of the ways it did was, not only did we kind of work out the funeral aspect of it first, and that, as I said, is where the emotion was, but then we even got into, okay, if Superman dies here, well, what leads us up to it? So you kind of know, all right, here's a point where Superman dies roughly, without knowing exactly how. Well, how do we get there? And that's when we really started to build everything out. A couple of ideas from the funeral, I think, got pushed forward. A couple of things that had been advanced got pushed into the funeral. And we kept just building it bigger and bigger as we went forward.
Wow.
One of the ideas that came up actually came from Dan's inker, Brett Blevins. I'm sorry, Brett Breeding. Sorry, Mr. Blevins. Brett Breeding came up with the idea of the progression of the fight being spread out over all 4 issues, and it's starting with 4 panels per page, and then the next issue being 3 panels per page, and the next issue being 2 panels per page, and then the death of and Dan's issue being all splash panels, and that I think sort of ended up being kind of a stroke of genius in that it elevated the not just the the visual impact of the fight, but it sort of elevated the pacing. And that's something I didn't quite realize until I read it in the first omnibus that came out, because an individual panel is a moment in time, a beat in time. And so the fewer panels you have, literally the action, the faster paced the action is. So as the fight goes on through 4 issues, it gets not just bigger, but faster. And it creates a wonderful flow, a wonderful sense of urgency, so that when, Dan does the coup de grace, everybody really feels it.
And in addition to that, even if you look at 75 itself, it starts out with splash pages that were actually drawn somewhat inside the panel borders so that there's more white space around the edge of the page. And then by the time we get about 2/3 into it, we start to have pages that bleed off, scenes that bleed off the pages. So then we've had the splash pages that then become a double page spread that then folds out into the triple page spread. And as an aside, in the last omnibus, which reprinted all of this, they finally reprinted the entire 3-page spread. It's the first time it ever got reprinted. We went, 26, 27 years. And part of the problem is, because I had brought it up with DC, it's like, are you guys ever going to reprint it the way it should be? And so many people were now working at the company, working in the collected editions department, who had only ever seen it in a trade paperback. They had never seen the original and didn't even know there was a triple page spread. So finally, we got that included, and that was kind of a moment of triumph. So because that's the way the story was meant to be.
Yeah, it's like if you go to the movies and suddenly at the end the screen becomes the whole theater.
Wow.
It was amazing when you unfolded the 3-page spread. That was like, wow.
But I think it goes to show that the Super Summits were a unique thing, and that really everybody contributed something, and that if an inker had a good idea, or if the colorist had a good idea, it went up on the board.
That was one of the things I actually loved about the summits, was that everybody had a voice, including the colorists.
Yes. And
Everybody
I just want, and there was no better indication of that, Wheezy, than Glenn Whitmore, who was our colorist,
Yes.
must have brought up like 5 different times, Superman red, Superman blue. And we eventually got to it.
Yes, he
I
got to
know.
it. I know. I'm so glad for him.
Yes.
Actually, I have a question for you. The Super Summits is that a usual or regular practice from DC then, or it was just for the Superman team, or they did that the same for Batman or other books?
I don't think it was. The Super Summit method really is, in fact, the Marvel method, writ gigantically large. Back in the early days of Marvel, the way Stan and Jack would just talk through a story, and then Jack would go home and he'd draw it up and make some dialogue suggestions in the borders, and then Stan would write the dialogue, or Stan would write a synopsis of the story, and then Jack would draw it up, making whatever changes he wants, and then Stan would dialogue it. And when I was working at Marvel in the mid '80s, that's the way most comics were still done. On Power Pack, Louise would give me a plot synopsis where every page, every paragraph equaled a page of comic art, and it was basically, it wasn't 1-to-1, but each sentence was a description of a panel, and it was usually without the dialogue, unless there was some sort of key bits of dialogue she wanted to include. It was just, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, and somehow miraculously everything was in there that a person needed to fire their imagination. That's one of the geniuses of writers who can write this way. But at Marvel, it was always done, one writer, one penciler. And when Mike left Marvel to come to work to DC, he had the incredibly ambitious idea to create a writer's room of the type that they have on television shows, where everybody would get together and work Marvel Method. So it was like Marvel Method times 12 or 13. And it's I think miraculous that it worked as well as it did for as long as it did. I think that's a testament, A, to Mike as an editor, and B, to our dedication and, as Dan said, sort of shared vision for the character. But I had never been done at DC before. DC had always been a full script company where the writer writes a full script, almost like a screenplay, and tells the artist exactly what to draw and exactly where to put things on the page.
Although actually, John, just to jump in real quick, when
Yeah.
that had already started to change quite drastically, because so many writers from Marvel had already come over, whether it was, Roger being one, Roger Stern, Roy Thomas, and Jerry Conway too. So the DC had already started to make that move to kind of Marvel style, and on probably over half its book by I'd say half the line by that time. So
that is, that's probably accurate, but I don't think any of the books were doing it on the scale that Mike was trying to do it.
No,
it was my point.
And the other thing about it that's odd is Mike wanted it as a goal, but I think there was a way he could kind of sneak it in and have it happen, because earlier when we'd meet, it would be like Jerry Ordway, me, and say Roger Stern. And because Jerry and I were drawing our books, they already had the artist there as well, right? So the idea is, well, Roger should have his artist there too. So all of a sudden they say, oh, it's no big deal. We can invite one more guy. And so I think there was a way to kind of build out the budget in a sneaky way by having a couple of writer artists who were only half the cost of getting in there.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question that I've never actually thought of to ask you before, Dan? When that started to happen, did it suddenly seem like it was getting too big? Because if it had just been you three guys and Mike, that's kind of a nice, tight, classic Marvel structure of a sort of a limited collaboration. Did it start to seem, were you worried that it was going to get too unwieldy?
A little bit, but then what we found is what you found, which is there were a lot of good ideas. There were some crazy ideas that would come out, and then we'd talk about it, and some of those would go away or get changed or built up. But at the same time, the esprit de corps that it built was worth any potential trade-off that way. And it might make the meetings more cumbersome, but it gave everybody a voice. And if everybody had a voice, they felt more invested. And that's what made us as strong as we were.
Yeah, I could not possibly agree more.
Yeah.
Right now, I think it's interesting to ask this question. I mean, at some point before Jerry Ordway say, let's kill Superman, and they had told you that the wedding was off, with all of these ideas running back and forth at the Super Summit, is there anything that you would have done differently instead of killing Superman? Any particular, for either Wheezy, you, Dan, or you, John, an idea that you would have liked to try instead of killing Superman, right before Jerry Ordway yelled, let's kill him, and everybody started rolling the ball with that one?
It's been how many years? Who remembers?
We're heading into our 30th year.
I think Dan already said he had ideas.
Well, yeah, I did, but as much as anything, and John gave mention to this, I just wanted physical confrontations for Superman, because
I agree.
Lex Luthor was a business guy. Brainiac at that point was a guy in a suit. We had Prankster, he was a guy in a suit. We had Toyman, he was a guy in a suit. And it's like, when did I get to draw Superman hitting someone? And really, it was the artist in me who kept saying, I want to draw a fight. I want to draw something that can give Superman a run for his money. And I did. And this, when I had this thought, it didn't have anything to do with Death of Superman. I always wanted to just do a fight that would just go right through the middle of Metropolis. And I don't know if I saw it ending in the Daily Planet, but obviously it had to be involved. But I just wanted Superman to have more physical foes, and someone that could really measure up with him.
I agree with that. I loved the idea of Superman and somebody just slugging it out power to power. That that interested me. Probably because of my Marvel background, where that's pretty much how we solved our problems at Marvel.
And also because Superman didn't have that.
No, he didn't.
No.
And you're
No.
absolutely right about that. I think it made it more interesting. It also made it more interesting that Doomsday came out of nowhere.
Yes.
Mhm.
And he came without any explanation why he was doing it, who he was. He was this force, like the shark in Jaws.
Yeah.
Just kept barreling through the city, destroying things. And I think that made it powerful too. You know, the kind of like a tornado where you don't know what it's going to do next because you don't understand you don't understand its motivations.
Yeah.
There was-
Often the best villains for a character are those that are either just the same with a twist or those that are completely the opposite. And I think what Doomsday always represented was being totally the opposite of Superman. And Superman is this voice of logic and reason. And one of the things I love about the character is
Passion.
I think if Superman lands in front of a villain and they've got the guns, he'll say, don't bother, let's talk this out. Let's figure it out. Whereas Batman just wades in and kicks the crap out of him. And Doomsday is someone that Superman could not reason with. Superman could not figure Doomsday out. He could not outplan Doomsday or use strategy necessarily because Doomsday didn't have it. And I think the idea of Doomsday being so much the opposite of Superman is also what added to that. And I think, as I recall, we talked about that a little bit in the room, and I know we used the term force of nature a lot, but I think as we got into the stories, we started to build on that even more because I think when we all started drawing the character and we did the covers first, and you'd see the rage in the character. And the other part of it is not only did Doomsday come out of nowhere, he came out of the ground, which I thought was kind of this wonderful metaphor of sorts. And him having that green suit where he got in one hand free so he could slowly punch his way out. It meant we could see Doomsday slowly come out of that green rubber suit, which was sort of like a straitjacket. And I think that too was an awful lot of fun with the story because you just saw that unrestrained beast emerge.
One of the things that I love about the design of Doomsday is that the way he's designed feeds into this notion of him being just inexorable fate, a force of destiny, because he doesn't really have a face. His face is covered with these bony protrusions. He's got bones over his eyes. His line of his mouth is obscured by the jagged bones around his face. And so he's he doesn't exactly have a face. There's at no point where you can look at the monster Doomsday and see a character. You're really seeing a monster. And I think people have since tried to turn Doomsday into a character, and at one point he was talking and all of that. And in many ways, I think that sort of weakens the concept because one of the greatest strengths of Dan's design was that this was not someone you could talk to. This is not someone that Superman could reason to. He couldn't appeal to their passion. He didn't know what to expect because it's not a person, it's a thing.
Also, I loved the slow reveal. I mean, that was really something where you got to see a little bit of Doomsday as it went along, the doom, which we did and as part of the introduction. And there was a scene, I don't remember who did it. I don't think it was us, John, was it? Maybe it was us, where Doomsday puts out his hand and a bird lands on it.
Yeah, that was you, Weezy. that was you. The Disney bird.
Okay, I love that.
The Disney
scene.
bird was you.
I would have loved to
Talking
have
about that in the room. I
It has-
remember specifically that coming up in the room, and that's when, at that point, we were humming. I mean, the ideas were coming out a mile a minute at that point. And there were always these classic scenes where the Hulk would stop and a bird would land on his finger and the Hulk would go, "Oh, nice bird," or he'd pet the deer. It's like, no,
Yeah.
Doomsday crushes the bird. So, yeah.
That was amazing. How long before Death of Superman saw print, and how long did it take from the first conception of the stories of the Death of Superman until the printing came?
A year.
Was it like a year? It was a whole year.
We had our meeting in, like I said, the first week in November of 91. And then, really, if you think of that, that meant then the book came out, Superman 75 came out in November of 92. So you work back from that. It meant we were all working on the story very actively, by April of 92. And the story started to appear in print in October of 92. But it all got planned out in that meeting in early November of 91. So really, that is now 30 years ago.
Okay.
It is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think one of the I think bravest strokes of the whole thing was that Mike was actually able to convince DC to stop publishing Superman for 3 months?
Yep.
2 months, something like that.
Two and a half.
Which from a marketing perspective, again, this is part of the reason I guess it made the news. Suddenly previews didn't have any new Superman comics. So when he dies, he really dies. And he really did die for, a while.
Because
Got
actually,
better.
Yeah.
Well, it paid off in the long run, but I can understand it making DC very nervous that if we stop publishing for 3 months, our readers will lose the habit of picking it up and read
Right.
something else. So it was a risk on DC's part to do it, but I think it was a smart choice.
Yes.
Question. It took about a year for all of this, and it finally comes out. Were you guys prepared for the kind of reception that these comic
was
books
gonna ask
had?
that.
Me.
I mean, because we know, every time you're doing something artistic, you hope that once you hit it out there, it'll be successful, and that's what you're hoping for. But were you prepared personally for the kind of reception that the Death of Superman had on the entire world? I mean, everybody was talking about it. It was just really big.
the impact.
The impact. I mean, how did you guys live through that? I mean, you guys were the ones who actually did it.
And I mean, I
Well-
want to add to that question is because you guys already have been doing some tremendous work on Superman. I mean, for me personally, and not only for me, many people agrees with me, is that you guys, along with Mike and Jerry Ordway and all the other guys, Tom, you were already doing a great job on Superman. Right after the revamp in 1986 with John Byrne, you guys took the chores on Superman, and the books were doing really good. So it was not something like you guys really needed to do something to bring Superman on the top of the comic book industry, because Superman was already there.
Yeah.
So, and I remember those stories, the previous ones were top notch. And when the Death of Superman came, the impact was just like, and it must have been hard to think. And I mean, this is more like a question. Did you guys at some point said like, oh my God, after this, what are we going to do next?
Oh, yeah. I think it's important to note that when we killed Superman, and the books were going to go away for a while, we didn't know how Superman was going to come back. We didn't plan any of that out. We didn't know for sure exactly when he would. We had a vague idea, and we figured, it'll involve Adventures of Superman number 500 somehow. But we didn't have anything planned out. It took us so much just to get to the end of the story where Superman dies. Because the books went past Superman 75 for, I think we all had like 2 more issues after that, right? So that was Funeral for a Friend. It took us so much to build that out that we didn't have an answer for how Superman would come back. So when we finally got together and had to plan that story, one of the first things Mike Carlin said was, this has to be good because everybody's watching us and they think we're going to screw up. So, you know.
Yeah, and at the time, something that was amazing that I don't know if it's been done, if it was ever done before, and I'm not sure if it's been done afterwards, was the triangle system. At that point, Superman was being published a different title every week, and the story ran, each title had its own story, but there was all these subplots and everything going from one to the other. So as a fan of Superman, you got a new story that was in continuity every single week. And the triangles helped the fans
keep it in order.
know when it was coming. Yeah. I don't know if it's been done before or afterwards. I mean, X-Men, Batman, they don't have that kind of tight continuity that you guys had, and it was amazing.
No, I don't. Well, you know, part of it is, and I also want to say I very much appreciate the comment from a bit ago that the books were good before we did the Death of Superman, because I think we're all very proud of those. And the fortunate thing we did is, when Man of Steel launched as a title, we kind of did our first exercise having things connect a little bit. And then we did Panic in the Sky somewhat after that, where we connected things even more, and we found out, okay, we can all work together and we can tell a story. And so those were the dry runs that took us to Superman. And I think those worked out well, and they helped us a great deal. I don't think without those that we could have done Death of. But to get back to the numbering system and everything else, it's part of what pulled us all together. One of the reasons you don't find other books doing it is the writers don't want to do it, or the editors don't want to do it, because you have to give up a lot of yourself to work in a team format like we did. And I always saw it as we were kind of like a band. And, you know, we had one person on keyboard, another person on drums, and, you know, we all had to make it sound good together. But as a whole, we were greater than the sum of our parts. And I think when we were firing on all cylinders, that's absolutely true. And that triangle number system, which allowed readers to see on the cover that they could read these books and that they could connect the way they did, I think just shows how much we were willing to try and make that work, and how hard our editorial team, Mike and his assistants, worked to pull it off.
Okay.
It was a logistical nightmare.
It was.
And if Mike hadn't had good support with his assistants, I don't think it could have been done. And we got these giant boxes, well, every week, of all of the work everyone had done, copies of all the work that everyone had done the week before, the entire team. So that was a lot of Xeroxing back in the olden days, and a lot of
FedEx.
collating and mailing out. And it was just logistically, it was monumental.
Oh yeah, no scanners, no computers.
No scanner,
Yes.
but it is one of the things that made, I mean, a lot of things made working on the Superman books in those days special and unique in my career. But one of the best things was that giant pile of Xeroxes that they mailed out every week, because, you know, you could have been up 18 hours a day for 3 days, for, you know, 6 days in a row, and be utterly exhausted. And then, you know, in comes pages from Dan and Jerry, and it re-energizes you completely, because there's all this great stuff. And so once a week, you got this sort of injection of stuff that reminds you of what it feels like to be a fan. And when you were a baby nerd drawing away in your bedroom. So I think that's part, it was a major part of why, when we came together for the Super Summits, that the Super Summits worked so well.
Yes.
We always knew what everybody else was doing. And
We
it was
admired
also
what everybody else was doing too.
Oh,
I
so
mean,
much.
everybody else was doing great work.
Yeah.
And also we could, you know, it's important as an artist to know how the guy before you is drawing a thing, so you're drawing it the same way. And you know, it was good for the writers too, because the writers could spot inconsistencies. I know that Roger was sort of a genius at sort of a no prize genius. He could spot when one of us had screwed up, and find a way to make it right in his chapter. So it was, yeah, it kept even, after the summits, we'd all go back to our various corners of the world and dweezil away in our studios all alone. But those huge packages every week kept us connected and kept us on point.
Right. Well, and it's also worth noting that somehow we had to do it because, we'd be working out of order because Man of Steel, okay, help me out, John. Man of Steel shipped right before Superman, right? Didn't you come out the week before Superman? Or was
No, I
No?
would. Well, yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
I was the 2 panels per page guy, and you
Well-
were the 1 panel per page
Yes,
guy on the
yes,
desk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it was. So I was, and yeah, so I came out right before Dan, but
Yeah.
Dan was almost always ahead of me in pages, almost always ahead of me.
Because we'd all be
So-
working at the same time. And I'd be drawing the front of the story that would have picked up from where John was supposed to be, but it's not like I could wait for John to be done. No one could wait
Right.
for the other guy to be done. So we were always
Yep.
working out of order. And I'd have, say, the first 4 pages done of whatever issue it was that month.
Yeah.
And then you tailor yours to match that. Your
There-
last 4 to match the first 4.
There were times when I would just sort of pencil in a general figure for a character because I didn't know yet who that incidental character was going to be in the book previous to me. So the packages gave us that kind of flexibility since, yes, we were all working at the same time out of sequence.
And
Yeah.
it was actually easier on the writers because we knew we had a week to get our story together and get it out to Mike so Mike could get it to the next writer.
Right.
And I think it was easier for us than it was for you guys who were, having to work and kind of have things meet up in the middle sometimes visually.
Well, I think drawing just takes more physical time
Oh,
to do a
Lord.
thing than
Oh.
writing.
No kidding.
Picture worth 1,000 words.
Yes,
Because in the time it takes to draw a picture, you could write 1,000 words.
Exactly.
Oh, easily. A few panels maybe if you're fast.
Not
Was
much.
there ever any time when some of you had to redraw a page or adjust a page because of this overlapping of times?
I can't remember a specific time, but I do remember sort of leaving a character blank or unfinished and then going back at the last minute once I know what the character looks like and finishing it up and then sending that in.
Okay.
So yeah, if it was a major character, the Mike was pretty good about getting somebody to do a model sheet for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for instance, Dan did a great model sheet for Doomsday in all his stages ahead of time. So we knew exactly how to draw Doomsday even before we saw any of Dan's pages of him. But sometimes for secondary or minor characters, you didn't know until you actually saw the page in the package. And so, usually only had to wait a week, but I'd sort of leave a spot open or just do a loose figure of it'll be, a guy about this tall. Yeah, sometimes never really had to redraw a lot, just sort of leave a placeholder open.
Yep.
And part of all of this, I don't know, just euphoria of what happened to, killing the character. I mean, did you ever get any hate mail by hardcore fans?
Yes.
How dare you?
I sent a hate mail.
Did you guys ever get any, even death threats, or because how sometimes fans can suddenly go just a little bit off the deep end, but any hate mail or anything like that, or just like everybody was so awed by the death of Superman that they didn't even think about that? Did you guys get any?
There was actually a fair amount, and even to the point where DC was talking with a personal services security type company on behalf of a couple of us, because a lot of it got directed at Mike, and I think a lot was directed at me because it said Superman dies in Superman 75 and all that. And it all was generated before the story came out, because the way people found out about it was when the solicitation catalogs came out. And that's when the news started to come out that there was going to be a story called The Death of Superman, and that he would die in Superman 75. So that was, say, roughly 2 months before the book came out. And in that time, people could work up their sense of vitriol and anger and write letters. And I think we're probably really fortunate the internet did not exist at that time as it does now.
Okay.
And this is the question from the artist and me. When you say this, all these huge boxes of info and the back and forth with the writings and the pages and stuff, did at some point, it sounds like at the Super Summits and everybody got along great, and there were 4 teams for one team for each book. But was there any time where, like you, John, said, yeah, like, I'm watching Dan's pages, oh man, I'm getting inspired and I'm gonna do a much better page than he did, and then
yes, the Xeroxes, the packages of Xeroxes of copies made us competitive, but not in a bad way. It just drove us to be better. I'd live to see what the other artists were doing, because like I said, if I could be exhausted from being up for 3 nights in a row, and those pages would come in and I'd see what the other guys were doing, and I'd be ready to go again. I'd be ready to kill.
And you didn't want to let your side down. I mean, you saw the other guys were doing really cool stuff. And you knew that it was up to you to try to at least be as cool.
Or top them if you can.
Like, yeah, well, that's always good, but so mostly you just hope. It was kind of inspirational in its own bizarre way.
Yeah.
Very
Felt
much.
responsibility. At least I felt responsibility to the people who were reading the books, as well as the people who were on my team.
That's one of the things about the Super Summit, the Marvel method of doing things, is, as Dan said, it did develop an esprit de corps, that a camaraderie that I'd never, that I haven't experienced since. It was kind of a unique moment in time. And when you feel like a team, when you feel like a family, and you feel like you have a voice, it makes you willing to go literally to the ends of the earth, and makes burning your candle at both ends okay. For some reason, you just want, you don't want to let your side down.
Okay.
And that's definitely something that you felt in the books.
Every day.
You read Superman, Man of Steel, action adventures, and every time you get the same feeling, that sense of family, creative family, doing the best books Superman ever done, because that's the way I feel. And yeah, you could actually feel that. And
something that was incredible, I got the chance to meet Mike Carlin few, 3-4 years before the Death of Superman at the San Diego convention. I was just another fan, and I was talking to him about the Krypton Man storyline, which back then we didn't have a direct market comic books in Mexico, so we only got Superman and action, and we didn't get adventures. So I was asking all this question, and he said, well, we already covered that like a year ago. And I said, oh, so in Mexico we do not get adventures of Superman. It was like, no way. I mean, that's not possible. What's your name, John Kelly? Your address? And when I got back to home after San Diego, there was this huge box. Mike sent me every single adventure comics I had missed. I mean, he was such an amazing guy, and you can feel exactly this. All the love you guys have, and this direction, the parental, I don't know, I miss for words, but the way Mike handled everything, it was amazing. I mean, you could feel the love in the comics.
I don't know, Wheezy, if you experienced this, but when we were leaving X Factor to go work on Superman, Mike did as he did for Carlos, and he sent me this gigantic box with absolutely every Superman comic since John Byrne started Man of Steel. So I got to read absolutely everything that Dan and Jerry and Roger and everybody had done before we ever joined the team. That was a pretty cool box.
Yeah,
It was great.
But obviously, it's ironic, but killing Superman is a labor of love. really, you really have to get into the character and, like the character enough to actually say, I think this is what we have to do for the character now. This is, what we've been picking up from you guys right now. But how did you guys personally feel when you actually put him in the grave? I mean, any kind of personal feelings of saying, he's in there. It's like, how does it make you feel? Because as a fan, it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And you just can't wait to be, the next week at the comic book store to pick it up. But as the guys who actually did it, how did it personally make you feel that you had killed one of the most iconic characters in pop culture?
Well, we had the advantage of knowing that if we killed him, we could bring him back.
Yes.
So there was that.
We weren't allowed to say that, John. We couldn't say
right
anywhere. We signed, I think, an NDA, didn't we?
Did they have NDAs back then?
I don't remember that.
It was. I signed something.
I've signed so many NDAs.
Remember, we went on. What was that network or the TV thing? QVC. And we were sworn. We swore we had to write down that we would not reveal anything.
Yes,
including
I remember that.
Superman what would happen?
Right.
That he would be back. We weren't allowed to say. So that was something we knew. I mean, we're not going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg, right? We're not going to leave him dead. Of course, I mean, he's a big, major licensed character for DC too.
Yeah,
right.
And certainly, they're not going to be pleased if we just leave him dead either.
So on one hand, we're all sophisticated professionals with the inside knowledge, and we know Superman's going to get better and blah blah blah.
We've offed a number of characters in our lives.
Yes. And in spite of all of that, Weezy, in spite of all of that, when you sent me the scene where Ma and Pa Kent are watching their son's funeral on television, and when I saw the scene where with Bibbo, the should have been me scene, I choked up. There was a part of me that forgot that I was this sophisticated insider and I knew he was going to be fine. It's all going to come out all right. But sitting there watching Ma and Pa on the couch, watching their son's funeral, even now, I sometimes think about this. I get a little choked up about it. So you can't escape if you care about your work and you're invested in your work, you can't really escape it, no matter what a cool, sophisticated professional you think you are.
John, we were also invested in all the characters.
Yeah.
I mean, we were invested in Lois and Ma and Pa and everybody.
Yep. Yep.
So we felt as they felt.
Yeah, I would also say
Yes, that's a
that
good point.
when I was drawing 75, part of it is that in and of itself, that issue was a problem because I had like 30 panels to tell the story.
That's right.
And splash pages all sounds cool when you think about it until you realize you have to communicate a story in 30 panels.
Yeah.
And I got so into it and trying to figure out the right way of doing it that finally, when I got to the end and I drew the death scene, it was a really weird feeling because it happens on two things. Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm done. And just getting through that issue was really like pulling teeth. But then the second part of it is, yeah, there's Superman and here's Lois. And we really did this. And once it's on the page as art, even when it's only in a pencil stage, it takes on a sense of reality that doesn't exist until then. Before then, it's all conceptual. Yeah, we're going to do this, drawing the death. But it isn't until it's drawn and you know what it looks like that you start to say, wow, that's really weird. And then the other one for me is that there was a poster that went inside that Superman 75 where they had the casket and it's a down shot on all the DC characters kind of standing around the casket and the Justice League as pallbearers. And I drew that on a massive oversized board and I know I got it done and I had to put it in this big, giant, enormous package with boards and everything so I could send it to Brett to ink. And I got it all taped up and I had given it to the FedEx guy. And when I walked back in the house, the phone was ringing. And it was Mike Carlin who told me at that moment that Joe Shuster had died that day.
Wow.
And that was really creepy. That just, I could not play. I just said, I just do this casket scene. I just packed it up and I sent it off, and there's sort of like saying goodbye to it, and you're sending it off, and that was very strange.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And on a related note, looking back on it, is there any particular page or panel that you still remember to this day? I mean, that was special for you guys during this whole adventure of killing Superman. Is there one particular like panel or page or frame or something that really sticks with you?
There are several.
Well, yeah, there are several. I think for me it was the Ma and Pa.
Okay,
That scene.
with them watching the
Yeah.
funeral on TV. It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That's definitely heartbreaking. I mean, you can't really look at that and not feel anything. It's just, it connects on a very emotional and personal human level.
And on that personal human level, once the story broke out, once it was on the news and on the newspaper and on the channel you guys went to, did something change for you? I mean, going to the store or to buy groceries, did people tell you anything in the street, or your friends, hey, you killed Superman? Something like that happened?
I don't know about these guys. We're pretty anonymous. I mean, our friends know we do comics, and they kind of care, some of them, but it wasn't like I was being mobbed on the streets, because people don't they don't know who I am mostly.
Okay.
But these guys are probably more famous than I am.
Well, I lived in a tiny little fishing village in Maine at the time, and it was the kind of little town where everybody knows everybody's business.
Okay.
And so I was known in town as that Superman guy. Oh, that Superman guy up there. I got surrounded by a bunch of burly fishermen in the store one day, who acted as though I had betrayed the country.
Okay.
I never heard that story.
They were genuinely upset, and it's a little hard to tell with Mainers how much they're putting it on, how much they're putting on, and how much they're really serious. But I did get the feeling that they were genuinely upset, and that they thought that what I'd done was somehow un-American.
Okay.
And I was really glad to pay for my milk and get the hell out of there.
Okay, but to be fair, one of the things that I can't remember where this came out. It might have been the New York Times. I'm not 100% sure. It was one of the more major newspapers. There was a columnist who wrote something that said, in effect, what does it say about America that we no longer have a Superman? And when you think about it, he thought it was kind of a reaction that, gee, we're taking away Superman, and that shows how dark America has become, and blah, blah. And there is a little bit of truth to that. I mean, at that point, Superman, as much as we loved him, was not the preeminent hero in comics. The world had drifted much more in Batman's direction. And, I think it had become, on the part of some, sort of corny to be interested in Superman, which, if you feel that way, I don't get it, but fine. And so to defend those guys, John, other and perhaps more intelligent people also sort of arrived at that sort of commentary. And it was an interesting discussion.
I actually agree with you completely, Dan. Mike is always very humble, and he says, "Oh well, it was a big deal because it was a slow news day." But I think it was a big deal because because of the phrase "truth, justice, and the American way," which you don't hear a lot anymore, but it used to be on the radio show and the TV show and everything else. And so people in the United States. For people in the United States, Superman was a symbol for us as a people. He represented our highest ideals as a nation. And things were already starting to change in this country, and I think people thought, well, geez, if Superman can die, what does that say about the American way? What is the American way now?
We had a friend in who a cartoonist, American cartoonist, Jeff Darrow, who was living in Paris at the time, and he was coming back from somewhere in the States and had gotten off the plane and got into a cab, and the cab driver realized he was an American and started fussing at him about how the Americans had killed Superman.
Okay.
This is a cab driver in Paris, but Superman was a hero that he was very aware of and admired, and was not at all pleased. Jeff Darrow had to defend himself. I mean, he said, yes, I do comics, but no, I didn't kill Superman. So,
Well, so John, those guys who came up to you, they were just looking for an intellectual discussion that day.
Yeah. I would say that was what they were looking for. Sure.
They sound like a squadron of Bilbos going up to you.
They were
Oh,
they were good tough fishermen from Friendship, Maine. They were all right, good fellas. Yeah.
We have
But
a question from Oscar Pinto. You know him. He's also part of the team. And,
Pinguino.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before I get to that, you said, Dan, that at some point, well, in that moment, Superman wasn't that relevant, that Batman was more important, that all these dark stories were becoming more popular. And I remember reading a couple of years ago when the new Superman movies were coming out, that somebody at Warner said that Warner didn't know how to make Superman relevant to today's audiences. And Neil Gaiman answered, you don't make him relevant, you make him inspiring. And that's basically the question that Oscar is asking. Is Superman still relevant? Is he still inspiring? And he also asked, how is your Walter and Louise's ghost cat?
What I always say is that Superman is who we should aspire to be, and Batman is who we are. And I think that in that context, there's always a place for Superman. And I have never understood the argument of what is wrong with a character that is out there to inspire people and help them be a better version of themselves somehow. I have never understood why that's corny. And if it is corny, that to me says more about that individual than it does about the character. So
True.
You're here.
Because you've actually, I've been reading over, the entire Rebirth series from a few years ago, and you're still very involved with Superman, Dan. I mean, you went from drawing to writing. How has that transition been for you?
Well, even back when we were all working on the books, I was both writing and drawing. And then when I was writing action those years as part of Rebirth and everything, I ended up drawing a few of those. I'm not as fast as I used to be. And writing and drawing a book a month is really, really hard. I mean, it becomes so all consuming. But I think that the key with Superman is if one understands the humanity within the character, it opens up the door to stories that are just boundless. I mean, if you take the idea, the concept of someone who's so human as Superman is, yet can fly into space and go, punch out whatever alien you want. There's a lot of latitude in between those things where you can tell a hell of a lot of stories. So I don't see not being able to have Superman stories to tell.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean,
Totally.
I completely agree.
I mean, just to add a little bit to that answer is just one of the things that Death of Superman proved back then in 1992 until this day is that the Death of Superman just proved how big the character and how important the character is, not only to the United States of America, but to the whole world. And also to this day, it is a story that it's remembered. It's been reproduced in animated features. Recently, just phony movies about the Death of Superman, like Justice League, which for me was to be for a complete uh, trilogy on its own. But anyway, uh, to answer that question, if Superman is still inspiring, I'd say it is, and it will always be. And it just proved as the biggest character. And not even when DC broke Batman's back, it was a big event, but it was not even this close to what the Death of Superman was. So
Yeah.
And one final question for me, and if you guys want to move on to the questions from the audience, is that after 30 years of the Death of Superman, is there anything in particular that any of you would have done differently if you were to do the Death of Superman again? Would you do the same, or would you like to change something that you made 30 years ago?
I can't think of anything that I would change. I wish what I had done was, I wish I would have kept a journal or something to document everything that was going on at that time. The fact is, I can't speak for everybody, but I suspect we were all so swept up in it that, we couldn't appreciate. We all appreciated what happened while it was happening, but I wish I would have done a better job of that. And a lot of it is just, we still have books to get out. That's the thing. We still have books to get out. Some of us had young kids. I had a 2.5-year-old. My wife was 6 months pregnant with our second one when the story came out. And it was just a very different time. And I sit back now and I could just kick myself for not being more thorough about, having a journal and documenting things, and just trying to have a better record of the way things were, because that was so unique, and we'll never have anything like that in comics again.
And
I
you
think,
know,
I
Go ahead,
think
John.
when people live through historic events, good or bad, they very rarely stop to appreciate that this is a historical event. They've got things they've got to do. You've still got to feed the kids. You still got to clean the floor. You still got to make your deadline. You still got to do what needs to be done. But to answer your question, there's not much I would change in the story. Sometimes I look back at my artwork from those days and I think, what were you thinking with those chins, man?
Yeah, I mean, that's the answer that I wanted.
What are you doing?
And then I understand that you should have kept a journal from those times, but you should start now. I mean, 30 years from now, 10 years from now, there should be a record of that. And to add to that, let me tell you, I was telling you before we started the show, when we started the first comic book store here in Mexico, it was a huge event for comic book fans, which, as you know, is like a very small percentage of society. But just a month afterwards was the Death of Superman, and the whole thing exploded. Because of that, there were more stores, and it just snowballed on its own. And there was conventions here in Mexico and more publishers. And the whole shape of the comic book industry today owes a lot to the Death of Superman. So you can add that to your memory that you really did change a lot of things. And here in Mexico, there's a before and an after from the Death of Superman.
One of the things that I do remember so fondly is when we were there, and I think, was it 94 or 95? Was it
94 was Massif, was 94.
Okay. So
95.
One of the things I remembered so fondly about that is as we sat signing the books, so many of the books that the Death of Superman books that were comics that were being brought to us were just all beat up. And they were wrinkled, and the covers were torn, and the pages were torn. And what that showed me is the love for the story that was there on the part of the readers. And it was so neat to see someone hand me a comic that was beat up like that. And they said, my brothers and my sisters read it, and everybody on the block read it, and my cousin read it. And instead of what we have here is someone taking a pristine comic out of a plastic bag and handing it to us to sign. And so when I was there, and I think we all talked about this at the time, we found out we had a very good feel, I think, for the impact that we had there and the love that was there in those wrinkled up comic books. It was great.
Cool.
Yeah, I will say I've been down to Mexico. Fortunately, I've been lucky enough to be invited to Mexico several times since then. And literally the last time I was down there, I think it was 2017. And a guy came up to me with a really tattered copy of the trade paperback, and he held it out to me and he said, "This was my father's."
You think he was handing you a lightsaber or something?
I know. And nothing is more gratifying than, I mean, I appreciate collectors. I'm grateful to collectors who buy multiple copies. But there's nothing more gratifying than feeling that something you've written or something you've drawn has had the desired emotional effect on somebody. And that just makes me feel very humble and grateful, because when you're a baby nerd drawing in your bedroom, you have dreams of maybe affecting somebody the way Jack Kirby is affecting you or whatever,
right?
And to get feedback that you actually touch somebody is wonderful. It's a wonderful feeling.
Cool.
Very grateful for it. I understand that this year is the end of El Mole Comics Convention, which is when I visited in Mexico City many times. That has now passed. And I'm sorry that your store has passed, because that was a grand and wonderful store.
Thank you.
And a landmark place. But I will always be grateful for the halcyon times that we got to be part of.
But you can come back anytime to Mexico City. It doesn't matter if there's a convention going or not. I can get you all guys at my place anytime you want.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and it's been great whenever you've been here. I mean, we've always had such great times. And that time in Mesif, when you all came, it was amazing for everyone. As you said, all the love, all the people that were affected, that were so grateful for all these stories. It's always great.
And also, it was so special because it was the very first time, even though I think we had another conventions going, I think it was the very first time that it really felt like we were bringing that Mexico was bringing really top-notch artists and writers, really important artists at the time. I don't think before that, no one the size of Luis or Dan or John had come previously. So that is completely a landmark, that convention, by the time you guys were here for the first time. So everybody here who is a comic book fan, our age, of course, remembers that. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So there's
we have plenty of fans who are really going crazy. Alfred Rodriguez asked something interesting. He asked a little while ago. He says, a question that's been nagging my mind from the first I read the story is, why didn't other powerful heroes like Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, or Captain Marvel actually help Superman?
Well, they did.
Well, so at that time, those characters were in very different places, and we did what we could. I was writing and drawing Justice League at that time, and so we got that crew involved. But the Justice League then wasn't, the most powerful 7 heroes, and we did what we could. But part of it was there were other people, the fools, who didn't want to play ball with us. So fortunately, because I was also doing Justice League, we could get that cast into the story. And then by the time we got to the end, when we could do the funeral scenes and things like that, suddenly everybody said, "Oh yeah, let's put our character in Superman that month." Yeah, can you guys use that?
Well, you can always argue that it happened so fast. I mean, the fight with Doomsday was really on a short time, like we were saying, John.
Yes.
It wasn't like took 3 days so everyone could jump in.
Yeah.
Right. It didn't actually take 3 weeks. It actually took a few minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
And
everybody,
could
all
read
the other
Superman
heroes,
pamphlet.
yeah, they all had things to do.
Exactly.
And I would argue, just from a geek perspective, that I think it wouldn't be in the mindset of most of the DC heroes to think that Superman, of all people, would need help.
Needs help, yes, of course.
Absolutely.
You know, oh, another monster in Metropolis. Superman's got it.
Exactly.
Geek Blue Review asks that he would like to know the opinion of you guys on the way they have handled the death of Superman and Doomsday on the Snyderverse Warner Brother films. Okay,
Well,
I think we can.
Next question.
Next
So
question.
I look at it this way. At one point, when Tim Burton was going to do kind of the Death of Superman movie, there were designs of Doomsday where he was like a giant insect. So with that in mind, I think they got a really big portion of the character right. And you always know that when something hits the movie, there will be some adjustments, but I like a lot of what's there.
Okay.
Okay.
We have a phrase, Walter and I have a phrase. It's, they're only trying to help you make it better.
Okay.
I kind of hate to say this, but I haven't had the 3 hours necessary to sit down and watch the Snyder version of
4
the
hours.
Justice League movie. 4 hours. Thank you. 4 hours to sit down and watch. I haven't seen Hamilton either. It's like, that's a lot of time for me away from the desk. So I haven't seen the Justice League movie. I did see the first one. I have mixed feelings about it because there are things they did well, and you can tell that there were people involved with the production that got it. And then but movies are big things that are made sort of by committee. And if you think about how much collaboration it took to make the comics we were making, multiply it times 100, with all kinds of, executives having a say in who actually aren't creatives at all, having a say in how things go. And you can see how, with a big movie like that, that anything good about it is kind of a miracle. It's kind of wonderful. So you just have to, it's a movie. Look, I'll tell you a story from my childhood. I loved the first Christopher Reeve movie. I found the second one. I actually walked out of the second one. It was just so infuriating because Superman gives up his powers to boink Lois. And when he gets pushed around by a bully, and then when he gets his powers back, he spitefully goes back to beat up the bully, which struck me as being really not Superman-like. And then, of course, he just makes Lois forget. So those things seemed so un-Superman-like to me that as a kid I was, furious, enraged. It has made me able to understand every outraged, obnoxious, annoying fan whoever gets in my face at a convention, because I know exactly how they feel. Now I'm like, yeah, that's a movie. There'll be more movies. There'll be another movie. And honestly, there are good ones and there are bad ones. And I feel like, optimistically, the DC movies are getting better.
I totally agree. Yeah. Louise, there's a question for you. How did you feel the first time you actually saw Doomsday in its final design?
You mean
you-
Dan's design?
Yeah, when you finally saw
It was the best.
Hmm.
I have to say that, John is my favorite human, except for maybe Walter. But but Dan won. That was his design was really the best. I mean, there was no question.
I mean, Dan came in with the drawing initially, and Mike,
Which I didn't realize that. I thought that he had invented it right there.
but Mike, in an effort to be fair, threw it out to the room, design the monster, and we all sort of vomited something out on the paper right there. But it was, as I remember it, it was unanimous
Oh yeah,
that
absolutely.
Dan's design was just purely better. It was a good, well thought out monster, and for many reasons, some of which didn't come clear until we were actually drawing the story, it was the perfect monster.
Yes.
And
There you
where
go.
do yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Where do you see comic books going, from here on in? I mean, how do you see the future of comic books and the future of DC Comics in that sense? Nowadays with all of these changes that have gone through. I mean, because they've killed Superman again, when they did the New 52s and they brought him back with Rebirth and all that stuff. But so, how do you see the future of comic books today? All of these artists and I don't know, all this pop culture just going back and forth, and the importance that comic books have gotten in Hollywood. All of these movies coming up from both from Marvel and DC. Where do you see comic books going in the future?
Well, I see it going way beyond just superhero stuff. I mean, they're already doing that. There are comic books about everything. I mean, look, Japan has comic books about literally everything.
Yes.
And I think that's spreading here. I think it's great. I think they're a wonderful teaching tool. Aside from just being, fun entertainment, they're out there their own thing. They're not movies and they're not television and they're not novels. They're comic books.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Well, I'll restrict myself to the superhero genre because that's what I know the best. I think that comic books are the mythology of 20th and 21st century culture, right? They're our equivalent of Thor or Hercules or any mythology of the past where that involved gods and monsters and heroes. And myths are stories that get told and retold with every generation of storyteller. Every new generation, the shaman sits around the campfire and tells the kids the stories of the origins of the universe. And so with every generation, the myth gets rebooted, right?
Mhm.
And so rebooting is part of the mythic cycle. And so you have a generation tell a generation of stories, and then a younger generation tells the same cycle again with some of the same elements, but spun for their own generation. So, and some stuff from the previous cycle sticks, and some stuff from the previous cycle gets left behind. We still have Superman Red, Superman Blue. We still have Bizarro. We still have Mixiospitalik, even though these are from several reboots ago. And we have most of the things from the original myth that Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created when it comes to Superman. So I think comics will always exist in some form, because it's an intimate form of entertainment, an intimate form of communication that really straddles between prose narrative and pictorial narrative. So comics involve a lot of reader participation and reader imagination. So I think comics will always exist in some form. I think the superhero genre will rise and fall as depending on the relevance of those myths at the time and how well the cycle is retold again. But a lot of the myths of the superheroes embody enduring values, and so as long as those values are expressed in the myth, and as long as those values continue to be relevant to an audience, I think the cycle will go around again and again and again.
Cool. And did you guys, Dan, when you mentioned that when you heard about Joe Shuster passing away, did any of you guys get the chance to meet Siegel or Shuster?
Yes, we all got to meet Jerry Siegel and his wife shortly after the death of Superman. We were all out in Los Angeles, and DC was kind enough to put together a very nice dinner where, and when I say all of us, I mean the entire creative team on all the books. We were all in LA. We had a very, very nice dinner with Jerry Siegel and his wife. And it was very nice, not just to get to meet them, but to also see the relationship as it existed between them and DC at that time. So it was a very wonderful, wonderful evening.
Wow,
Wow.
that's nice.
We usually have a question, when we're, because usually Beta asks, but since she's right now outside, she's giving me permission to ask this question on her name. What would you tell a young writer or a young artist who suddenly feels like they're not getting anywhere and they are about to give up and say, I'm not going to do this anymore? What would you say to somebody like that?
I'm not one who ever encourages anyone to give up. It depends on what they want. I always say that what I encourage people to do is not necessarily to walk away or to stay with it. I encourage them to identify what it is that they really want. And once they identify that, then the answer will be there. So that would be my advice. And if it's what they really want, if they have stories they want to tell, if they have artwork they want to create, then I would always say, stay with it, find a way to do it, but make sure it's that you're ready to go through what you have to go through to get to that point.
Okay. Thank you for that one. Wheezy, what would you say to somebody like that?
It depends. Again, taking off from what Dan said, thinking about what it is you really want. And if you want to tell your stories, there's a lot of ways to tell your stories. Yeah. The internet is out there and it's open for everyone. If what you want to do is get rich and famous, you work as hard as you can and you hope, but there's a lot of stuff that's out of your control at that point. So you just have to do the best you can to keep in your mind what it is you really need to accomplish for yourself. And, hope for luck, because luck happens. If you work really hard, you're going to get your break. But when your break comes, you want to be ready. You want to have worked hard as you can and done. When you show people your work, don't show them pages that you did overnight just to prove how fast you are, because comics have to be done quickly. You show people the very best that you can do. And I do think that there is a point where everybody will get lucky at some point, but you got to be ready for it when the luck comes.
Okay. Thank you for that one. And how about you, John?
There's a legendary artist in comics by the name of Neil Adams, who I think is like 81 this year and still drawing comics. Neil is a very dramatic figure. In some ways, he's like the William Shatner of comics, in that some people just hate him, and some people love him. And he's got a solid ego. Neil is known for giving the most brutal portfolio reviews. If you bring your portfolio to Neil, expect to get reamed. There are people who just dismiss this as, well, Neil's a big bully. He's not really a big bully. What he has is, he's doing something deliberate, in my opinion. I remember being at a convention in New York in 1975 and standing in a long line with other young hopefuls, clutching their portfolios. I think I was like 16 or 17 at the time. And the great man is at a table up ahead, and one by one, he's like crushing egos. It's like the It's like the scene in the courtroom in Ghostbusters 2 where the ghosts are knocking the chairs aside. Is that, it's just, you could just see these young hopeful guys just going away with their souls crushed. And I waited in line for my trial by fire. And and I remember thinking at the time, there's nothing Neil Adams could possibly say to me that would dissuade me from drawing comics. He could do your worst, Neil. You can't possibly dissuade me from drawing comics. And I think that actually was the purpose. That's the purpose of when Neil gives you the business, because first of all, he's not making stuff up. If he's criticizing you for valid things. He's telling you the hard, honest truth. And if you can't take it, then you don't belong in comics, because comics don't pay well, generally. There's as many people, there are more people who want to do it than there are jobs to do. And if you're going to be a comic book professional, you've got to be prepared for a very tough business, a lot tougher than a Neil Adams portfolio review. So when Neil puts you through the fire, that really helps you focus, as Dan and Wheezy said, that really helps you focus on, well, what is it you really want? How badly do you want this? Do you know the full cost of what you're doing? And for some people, yes, it is discouraging. And for some people, it's so disillusioning, they leave comics behind and they find something else to do. But then there are people who are just so bullheaded that nothing Neil can say is going to dissuade them. And that person probably has the temperament to succeed in comics.
So, John, what did he say to you?
Oh, God.
Come on.
Okay, I was hugely crushed because he said my work was great. He flipped through the pages. He asked me how old I was. 17. He snapped the portfolio shut, handed it back to me, and said, "Good, you're gonna make it." Off I went. And I was like, what? Where the hell? Where's my reaming? Where's my trial by fire?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's a wonderful story.
Actually, this is
he was very complimentary to Walter also. I think if Neil tells you you're going to make it, maybe you're going to make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe so. Maybe so. Since, every time I've seen Neil since, he's given me crap about not charging enough.
Everybody.
He catches me doing a free head sketch on somebody's comic book for them, and he gives me 10 minutes of scolding for not charging for that, which then morphs into a discussion about the expanding Earth, and then
actually,
and before I know it, there's a line of 40 guys who just want their comics signed who would like to kill me.
Actually, this is really funny. Would you guys tell us as fast as you could, how was your big break into comics?
Oh gosh. Okay, my big break into comics was I knew somebody.
Okay.
I was working in advertising promotion in New York, at a magazine. And I had a friend who worked at a comic book company at Warren Publishing, which is black and white horror comics, and creepy vampire and Vampirella, or creepy Eerie and Vampirella.
Yeah.
And she said, "There's an opening at my company that you could do the job and it pays better than your job." And I said, okay. I'll come and apply. And I got the job. And that was it. I went into the production department and I was semi lousy at production, but I was really good at the editorial stuff. And it was a small company and they just wanted an extra pair of hands to do anything. Gosh, I wish we had somebody who could write a letters column. I can do that. I wish we had somebody who could do blah, blah, blah. I could do that. So I just volunteered a lot, and they moved me over to editorial, and that was it. So, I mean,
Wow.
mine was not one of these great stories like John, and I think Dan too, where they knew what they wanted to do, and they went in there saying, I'm going to get a job in comics. I mean, I liked comics at the time, and I had read the Warren comics, but I didn't fall in love with it until I started doing it. And once I knew the work and the people, and people who do comics are pretty great. There was nothing else I wanted to do.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
Nice.
great.
But what was the name of the company? It wasn't Marvel Comics,
Warren
was it?
Publishing.
It was Warren. I
Oh,
went
Warren.
over to, I
Oh.
left Warren
Okay.
after, I don't know, about 6 years to go work for Marvel. Warren was
Oh.
very mad at me. He wouldn't speak to me. I was going in, he had a spy at Marvel. And I had gone out to dinner with Jim Shooter, he had asked me to come work at his company. And I said, I would think about it. I had pretty much decided that I would. And I went back to Warren to tell Jim Warren what I was going to do. He had already heard it, that I was going over to Marvel. And was totally pissed and virtually threw me from the company.
Wow.
It was really funny. I know we're friends now. We exchange Christmas cards and stuff. I loved the man in his own weird way. But yeah, his feelings were very hurt that I was going to leave the company. So
And how did you make how did you make the switch to writing, from going to editing to writing comics?
Oh, I was editing at Marvel for a few years. Jim Shooter hired a batch of new editors, and my workload was cut in half, and I got bored. And Shooter had been after me, or after all of us, to do freelancing as well as be editors, because he wanted us to understand what it was like to be on the other side of the desk.
Okay.
I could kind of color comics, but I wasn't that great at it. I could kind of do a lot of stuff, but but then I got bored because my work was cut in half. And I thought, well, I don't want to write some comic that would be taken away from another writer who's supporting his family by writing these comics. But if I make up something, maybe I'm not taking away, I'm adding to the pile rather than taking away. Mm-hmm. So I went to Shooter and I said, well, I have this idea. There's for these little kids, siblings who are superheroes. And Shooter kind of rolled his eyes and he said, well, write it up. I'll take a look at it. Maybe we can get a mini series out of it. He wasn't expecting much. And I wrote it up, and I had June Brickman had come, young artist, had come into my office who could draw wonderful children. And I said, well, I'll submit us together as a team. So I wrote up the first plot synopsis for the first 4 issues, and a series plot for the first issue, and added June's drawings into it and stapled it all together and handed it to Shooter, and he loved it. So he said, you've got a series, and the first issue is due in 2 months and is a double-size issue. Okay. And then June and I were writing and drawing. So that was it. That was my story. That's how I broke into the writing.
Wow.
And with Power Pack.
Luckily, people liked it, so they let me write more stuff.
Is your first story of Power Pack is the same story that John drew?
No.
John was my second artist.
Oh, okay.
It was so difficult to find. Oh, John, you should tell the story about how you got on to Power Pack, because that's a great story.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story.
Well, I've told it before on this show.
Yes.
Oh, you have? Oh, well then. Tell a truncated version.
Okay. Well, all right.
Or how you break into comics first, if you want.
That's the same thing.
Oh, it's the same thing?
Story.
Oh, okay.
Same story. I was living in New York with Judy on her boat, and she was still teaching at PS 166. And I had been sort of paying my way through SVA by doing hack caricature jobs around the city. But I really wanted to draw comic books. And I had sort of been working on a Superman story, and one day I was, Judy had just learned out she was pregnant. I really had to like quit being a fan and get busy. But I didn't know what to do. It wasn't the internet in those days. You couldn't just go online and find out everything you need to know. I didn't know what to do. So I was moping around the boat one day thinking, I don't know what to do now. I'm sort of trying to put together a portfolio, but I have no idea what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And Judy and I had been huge fans of Power Pack. We had discovered it a year before. We'd done sort of a hippie sabbatical, driving around in a van and sleeping and camping around the country, this super hippie stuff. And at night, I remember we stopped at a comic book store, and we bought the first issue of Power Pack that had hit the stands. This is while we were on the road, and we also bought issues of Walter's Thor, and we fell in love with whoever these Simonson people were. They were doing the best comics we had ever seen. We'd, snuggling after in our sleeping bags, we'd sit and read comics back to back together, and then trade comics. And we loved Power Pack. And so no matter what town we were in, we'd find the comic book store and get whatever the latest issue of Power Pack was. We loved that book. So our lives were sort of defined by between Thor and Power Pack at that time. So the Power Pack parents were obvious glyphs for Walter and Louise Simonson in real life. So Judy said to me one day, well, why don't you just ask Walter and Louise Simonson? They seem like nice people. I'm sure they'd help you. And in the comics, Judy figured out that the Powers apartment in New York on the West Side was Walter and Louise's real apartment, and that was only like 4 blocks from us. And while I'm complaining that no, how you can't just call strangers up and say, hey, how do I get in your business? And while I was complaining about that, she flipped through the phone book, found, I'm saying, besides, I'm sure they're unlisted. They're famous people. They're unlisted. She finds the number, she dials it, she hands me the phone. And I'm on the phone talking to the legend, Walter Simonson.
Wow.
Oh, excuse me, sir. Can you tell me how to become a comics legend like you? Or something. I don't know, but Walter's got this big Asgardian voice, and he spoke to me for like 45 minutes straight. Walter is a man who likes talking to a man who likes to talk. and he basically told me, he gave me basically a semester's course in comics in that 45 minutes. He told me everything I had to do, and I followed his instructions exactly. And I put together the portfolio just as he said to do it, with just the right amount of samples. And I called up. In those days, you could just call up an editor and make an appointment. So I knew somebody from SVA, I knew somebody at an editor at DC, and I called up and I made an appointment with them. And I made an appointment in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I made an appointment with Larry Hama at Marvel. Larry Hama, because Larry edited Conan, and I thought I could draw a bitch in Conan, and I never even thought about who I'd have to replace to do that. So I did these Conan samples, and I went to my DC appointment, and I had on a blue suit and a red tie and a fedora. And I sat next to the fiberglass statue of Clark Kent reading the Daily Planet. And I waited for like 4 hours. Finally, the receptionist went in and came back with the message that, the editor couldn't see me. So I left my portfolio for her to, because the package of Xerox is not originals. Obviously, I handed it to her to give to the editor when she had a chance. And I had to go run across town. I was almost late for my appointment with Larry Hama. So I ran across town, running through the streets, with my tie flying behind me, downtown to Marvel. And I came in, and the bullpen was just exactly like what you'd wanted the bullpen to be in those days. Jack Abel was still holding court in the bullpen, doing corrections and making jokes with Al Milgram, and the bullpen was surrounded by editors' doors, and all the doors were open, and people were hanging out like it was some kind of groovy hippie commune, and they were sharing ideas and sharing work and all this kind of stuff. And it was just exactly as Stan had promised it would be. It was the Marvel Age of comics, and I was there. So Larry comes out and meets me, and he trots me back to his office and looks at my Xeroxes, and he's looking through them, and he's thoughtful, and he says, "Well, kid, got good news and bad news."
Okay.
First of all, lovely Conan samples. We're not going to be firing John Buscema for you.
Okay.
But he said, "You're not leaving here without work."
Wow.
So he grabbed me by the ear, and he dragged me down the hall to Carl Potts's office, and he threw me in Carl's office and said, "Carl, give this kid work." He slapped me on the back. He said, "Carl's really good with new guys, so you'll do fine." Well, Carl's busy talking to this radiant blonde woman, and he's sort of absentmindedly looking through my pages, and I pieced together from their conversation that this is the legendary Louise Simonson, nicely bookending my phone call with Walter, and they're talking about Power Pack. And what's this? They're talking to June is going to leave the Power Pack book. That can't be. I love that book. June can't leave that book. And then the Angels took a hand. The year before, when we were running around in our hippie van, I had done a drawing of children playing on the beach. And it was a nice drawing, and I'd sold the drawing at a gallery for money. I was glad of it. Somehow or other, a sketch for that drawing I had done more than a year before found its way into my Marvel packet, not my DC packet, my Marvel packet. And so this sketch of kids playing on the beach kind of floated like a leaf down onto the table in front of Carl and Wheezy. And Wheezy and Carl at that moment were talking about, nobody in comics can draw kids, but June, nobody knows how to draw comics. The kids, they all look like muscular dwarves. And this drawing landed on his desk, and Wheezy said, "Look, Carl, he can draw kids." And Carl noticed, and he was very, very kind and very, very helpful. He had wonderful criticisms of my work, by the way, that were very helpful in the long run. But, he offered me work. Wheezy browbeat him into giving me a higher starting rate than normal. She said, "Carl, he's got a child coming." So I started with $5 more a page than starting rate at Marvel. So I was doing like $75 a page, dude. And then she invited me over to her house for lentil soup. And I should bring, Judy and our son. And so it was going to be a couple of months until June was ready to leave the book. So Carl gave me an issue of Alpha Flight to do and an issue of Solomon Kane to do, inked by Al Williamson. And I was finishing up one of those. I think I was finishing up Solomon Kane while Judy was delivering Kal-El. So
Wow.
I was in the delivery room with Judy saying, "Breathe, honey, breathe. Pass me the eraser, will you?" So my career and our son were born at the same moment.
Okay.
And that's it. And we brought the new baby over to Walter and Wheezy's house and ate lentil soup and became the best of friends. And we've been blessed by the mentorship and hospitality and friendship and kindness of the Simonsons ever since.
Wow.
Wow.
Beautiful.
I feel like
Totally.
Yes.
applause. What about you, Dan?
I can't compete with that. Come on. Well, there is a little bit of a Simonson connection in that when I was 14 years old, I always wanted to be. I'm like John. I wanted to do comics. I wanted to write comics and I wanted to draw comics. And I was always writing and drawing my own stories. And when I was either 13 or 14, I had written and drawn a Manhunter story. And for some reason, I thought if I sent it into one of the publishers that, I don't know, they'd like give me work or something. I really don't know what I was thinking. I just did it. And someone actually showed it to Walter at that time, who then wrote me a letter and said, gee, I'm flattered by this. You mind if I keep this? In exchange, I'll do a Manhunter drawing for you. And I said, oh, yeah, okay. So to this day, Walter can effectively blackmail me by threatening to haul that story out of his drawer somewhere.
Walter still has it.
See, you say my name, I'm like Thor.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Walter Simonson on screen.
But Walter was so nice because he would encourage me through the mail. We traded letters for a couple of years, and I would send Walter my work. He would critique it and send it back to me, which was so kind. And that's why he still gets to blackmail me to this day. So, but that gave me the encouragement to keep going. And then one day here in town, Mike Grell was here doing an appearance at a store. And I stopped and showed him my work. And at that time, he had been writing and drawing Warlord and was no longer going to be drawing it. They were looking for an artist. And he encouraged me to send my work into the editor, who was Laurie Sutton. And I was drawing the book like 2 months later and from then it was just off and running.
Wow. That's amazing also.
That's amazing.
I will say that,
Dan, was it, where's
the old Manhunter stuff was really, for a kid, it was really amazing. It was really, it had a lot of thought in the storytelling. I saw a few swipes from the storytelling of Manhunter I did.
Oh, sure.
It was still well put together and designed surprisingly at that age for someone.
Yeah,
I was very impressed.
I remember at the time, you had told me about it. You had told me about this kid who did this really, really, I mean, it was obviously a very talented kid. He was so young too.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
So,
I've actually seen those pages.
if I do post it, I'll ask you about it first before I post it.
Yeah.
You know, the funny thing is, I have not seen it since the day it left my desk because I never made copies. It's not like I sat there with a copier in my house. So.
And I think if you looked at it, you'd actually kind of be a little bit proud of your little 14-year-old self. It's.
Oh yeah.
I've done a lot of teaching of kids, and really, it's all there, man. You can see your future in those pages.
Well, that's nice to hear.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if we can dig out the
If I can find it, I'll make scans and send them to you.
Okay, that would be both great and frightening. John said this earlier. I mean, we all look back at our early work and just go, ooh.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see my early work and I think, wow, what happened? I was so good back then. Where did it all go?
Well, your old work was better, Walter.
Yeah, absolutely.
everybody's old work.
Everybody's old work was better.
Now that we're talking about Dan, I want to take this chance. There is a fan whose name is Ale Ribo that he wrote a few ago that he named his son after you because you are his hero, and that he wants he can kill for you to say hello to his son. His son is Dan.
Ask
Ale
him,
Ribo.
is his son just Dan or Daniel or what is it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. He just says he named his son Dan after you, and that he can kill for you to say hello to your tocayo. Tocayo is a
Namesake.
Namesake.
Okay. Hola, Dan. That is so nice to see you. I hope you are doing well.
Great. That's great.
Thank you. And the fan in me, and I've been reading the questions is that in your wall behind you, Death of Superman original art that you have
Yes.
hanging in
Yeah.
your wall frame? Could you bring it out? Could you show
Here.
it to us?
I gotta go.
Whoa.
Oh,
Nice.
So, yep.
What was your
That's
address
great.
again, Dan?
Can you email that to me? Could you mail it
333
to me?
Fort Knox Way.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions? I don't know how we are doing on time. I don't know if you
Well, I have a
guys.
question. This is from me actually. What about all the originals from the Day of Superman? The cover, the dead scene. Do you your pages, John? Do you keep any of those? Were those sold? What happened to the original artwork?
That's interesting.
You're asking Dan or you're asking me?
Both, actually.
Both.
Both. Well, there about a third of them belong to Dennis Janke, and I think any of them that you see on auction or for sale are pages that Dennis has sold because of my share, I have them all right there.
Okay. Okay.
All except one. You gave me one.
Oh, okay.
I
I
have
gave you
one
one.
of your Dead
Yeah.
of Superman original.
Yeah, there are a couple. Oh, and I did sell a couple of the key covers to help put Kellall through college.
No.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, Dan, if you want to feel competitive, you can give one of your pages to me too.
Unfortunately, I only have that one page from Superman 75. I have some of the covers from around that time. But not many of the pages at all. It's and it's always weird to go to a convention. This happened to me not long ago, and someone had a page, and you saw they had the old price written on the back in terms of what they paid for it, and you just go. So I have some. I wish I had more.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, I really can't think of a more talented team of individuals with more heart than you guys to actually have come across, one of the most important moments in comic book history, which is the death of Superman. I mean, I can't think of anyone that actually would do a better job than what you guys did, because you really changed comic books. I think, I think it's safe to say that. And I think that as a fan, I can only say thank you guys for all of your wonderful work. I mean, I think it's been inspiring, and I think it's been one of the most important, artistic works in comic books, and it's been our honor and our privilege to have you guys share all of these stories with us tonight. I really thank you guys from the bottom of our hearts.
Absolutely. I mean, believe me, I try to get to make a living drawing comics, but I also teach comics, and I especially love comic book history, and I like to put everything in context. And there's always, when you get to the Day of Superman, it's a milestone in the history of comic books. And again, thank you so much for being here, because it's amazing for us, both as professionals and as fans, to be able to share these moments with all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I almost feel like, I'm talking with music with the Beatles, it's like that big for us right now. It's like you guys really came and did something that I don't think will ever be able to be done again. I mean, I think it's really unique, and I think it's fabulous. Thank you guys.
I just want to say thank you, and this was a very special night for me, because not only you guys represent what as a young man and a child I love the most, which is Superman, and I was fortunate enough, and God bless me well enough, to meet you guys at first as a fan, and then later on as a professional. I pretty much the same way that John met Walter and Wheezy. My story with John is pretty much the same, but then through John I met Walter and Wheezy. Wheezy was the first writer that I ever worked with in my career in comics, and we had a tremendous time at Vanguard, and with Walter and Wheezy, and with John. Dan was, as John was one of my favorite artists, Dan Jurgens was also my inspiration, one of the greatest artists. at that time, and I've had a chance to work with him too in the past, and I just feel blessed, just not to call you my friends and family, but and colleagues. This is very special. I want to thank you guys for coming along and do this show. This show was promised since the very first day that this show was conceived a year ago, and I promised Carlos that we would have this show with you guys. I wish that Tom Grumet and other people that were involved at the time would have been, but we decided that the three of you guys were the most important to us, and it was going to be more dynamic. And it's been a while since the last time I saw Walter, and now that you're here, Walter, we want to have a show with you. So
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
I'll write you, and I will commit you to. We have to do a special show with you if you are available. We would love you to accompany us. I would like to thank John. John actually is the padrino of the show. The padrino in Spanish is our godfather. He was in our first show, exactly. And Dan, you're a great guy. I mean, what else do I have to say that it's not been said before? But I'm really humbled that you accepted the invitation, and you're so kind. Let's keep more in contact. Now that I'm back into comics, hopefully we'll be able to work together again in the future. I would love to do that.
And perhaps now that we can travel again, I think.
Okay.
Each other.
Knockwood.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you guys. I think hands down, this is the best show we've had
Ever.
So far,
since the show
This
started.
is hands down super show.
Thanks
from a
so much.
Super team.
And
Thank
we
you,
have to
guys.
have a show with Luis too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably a show with just each one of them would be also,
Also.
because this was the death of Superman. But one of the most important aspects of this show, and this is that we've been discussing before, is that we don't only want to meet the huge superstars in comics and talk about the work and stuff, but we want to go more intimate. We Mexicans are, we like to hug, we like to kiss, we like to know everyone. We want to make friends to anyone, and sometimes these little chit chats that we've had, like how you broke into comics, how did you get along with each other and stuff, that is what makes this show different. And I think it would be worth it to plan shows with each.
Yes,
With
absolutely.
Every
you
one
guys.
of them.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
probably get Arthur Adams, Mike Mignola, and people like this Ice.
Yeah.
Probably. So thank you guys.
Thank you guys. Thank you very
Really,
much.
really,
Yeah.
really appreciate your time and your effort, and we love you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes. I think you guys I think this is the first 30th anniversary reunion of the death of Superman thing that has been done so far.
Wow.
You guys, yeah, you
So
guys
that's
are
to
on
our
top.
credit.
And for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some DC stuff coming down the pike that we'll be involved with too.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool. Great. It's really cool.
Okay. Again, so on
Probably mention what are you guys working on right
Yeah.
now, so people can know what are you working on right now, Wheezy and John and Dan, so fans can
Keep following you.
keep following you.
We're working on something together right now. It's Marvel is doing something X-Men Legends. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. And we did an Apocalypse X Factor story that was a couple of issues, 3 and 4 and 5 something. And now we're doing a Caliban story that spins off of the Apocalypse story that involves the New Mutants. So that Walter just finished that this morning.
wow.
Hey,
That's great.
Cool. What are you doing, John?
I am well, first of all, I want to plug a class I'm teaching. There is an organization called Stage 32, which is a place for people to connect in the film business. and they approached me about doing a comic book lab. So I am doing sort of like a short version of a master class for them in 8 installments, starting in January. So anybody anywhere in the world, it's all done on Zoom like this. Anyone in the world can go to stage32.com probably and sign up, and you get to meet other people with similar interests. And then they have all these different classes, not just my class, but in anything you might be interested in the creative and predominantly film arts. So that's starting first week of January. Tomorrow I have to draw a tribute to John Paul Leon. And then
man.
Yeah, Walter's doing that too.
and then after Thanksgiving, it's back to the project I'm doing for Storm King that our son Kal-El actually wrote. So, and I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about it, but that I'm on issue 4, and it'll be fun.
It looks great. I can say that, right? I've
Yeah,
seen
I can say that.
It looks awesome. I know. I've seen the
and
pages.
there's a this is a little bit old news now, but there's an episode of Teen Titans Go on still available now on your streaming services called Creative Geniuses, which is a tribute to George Perez and Marv Wolfman that I did 2 minutes of animation keys and cycles for. So I got to be an animator this year, which was really, really fun. And if you watch it, you'll see it's kind of like, yes, it's kind of like George Perez processed through my colon, you know.
Those are beautiful drawings. I've seen them.
Oh, thank you.
And you then?
What about you, Dan? What are you working on right now? So fans can.
I am currently writing a series for DC called Blue and Gold with really incredible art by Ryan Sook. That's an 8-issue series. I just got done drawing not long ago an issue of X-Men Legends that I think is coming out next month. And I've also been doing quite a wide variety of covers at Marvel recently, which has been a lot of fun to get back to drawing some of those characters. So I'm all over the place these days.
Cool.
Awesome.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Terrific.
Perfect.
Okay, with that, I think that this, again, thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts. This has been the most amazing and super incredible show we've ever done. Thank you so much. Gracias a todo el mundo por vernos. Mañana ya estará subtitulado esto automáticamente por YouTube. And guys, we will definitely see you again sometime here. And
Hope so.
be safe, be happy, and you made us all very, very happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Gracias.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Buenas noches.
Buenas
Thank you,
noches.
Luisi. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yeah. John Weezy, great to see you again.
That was great.
Been
seeing
too long.
you. Yeah.
Been too
Yeah,
long.
Dan, it's good to
This
see
is
you
actually kind
too.
of fun.
It's really good to listen to your stories, guys.